Hello and welcome to episode number 226. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Nice to have you with us. According to a study published in the Journal of Business and Psychology, leaders who make mistakes are seen as less competent, less desirable to work for, and less effective than leaders who do not. However, in a complex business world, and especially on projects, mistakes are unavoidable. What separates us project managers from everyone else is that we often aren't afraid to make mistakes. We are resilient and know how to rebound from them. But how do we do that? Carla Fair-Wright is a long-time listener of the Project Management Podcast here. She got in touch with me and asked if her presentation, How to Recover from Mistakes and Keep the Project Moving, might be a good fit for us. Of course it is. In our interview, she explains 5 of the top 10 most common mistakes of project management and how to avoid them. We'll discuss techniques from positive psychology and competitive sports that focus on how to quickly rebound from mistakes and how to cultivate and use a strategic system for mitigating them. You'll also learn how to manage your own reaction along with the loss of trust or damage to one's reputation. And now, make no mistake, you will enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcast's feature interview.
Today with Carla Fair-Wright, president of Houston project management firm Optimal Consulting.
Hello, Carla, and welcome to the Project Management Podcast.
Hello, Cornelius. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, absolutely. I always love it when listeners speak up and say, hey, I'm a listener of your show. I want to be a guest on the show. That's always great. So you suggested that we talk about mistakes. In particular, you have a presentation that you've given called How to Recover from Mistakes and Keep the Project Moving. So let me begin with the obvious question here. Why do we make mistakes?
There's several reasons why we make mistakes. One of them is it's hard to change. We want to go with the status quo, with the bias. We want to avoid the pain of regret. Another reason that we make mistakes is memory is unreliable. We have what's called rosy retrospection. In other words, we tend to remember things a little bit better than they were. Another thing that happens that we need to understand is that mistakes are unavoidable. And let me share a story with you. Your perception is economical. And this is a true story. There was a man named Bert who went into a bar, and he was seated next to a gentleman who was very muscular, broadly built, who'd had a few too many drinks. The gentleman was saying things to a couple at a nearby table. Bert interrupted him and said, I think you had a little bit too much to drink. You need to tone it down. The man turned quickly with his arm raised, and Bert defended himself by striking the gentleman. As he struck this man, he noticed, as he fell off the bar stool, that he had no legs. Then he noticed in a corner was a wheelchair. So what could be a greater mistake than striking someone disabled? And why did he not see that? It's because your perception is economical. You see the things that you need to see. And this is one of the primary reasons that we make mistakes.
Before we move on, a quick question here, just thrown in. Why did you decide to talk about mistakes, to make a presentation about mistakes? I know you have a consulting company, Optimal Consulting. Is this something that you consult on?
As a project manager, I do a lot of consulting here in the Houston area, and I noticed that one reoccurring theme was project managers will make mistakes, and they tend to not move forward with it. A mistake is actually an opportunity for you to improve your project management skills, improve your decision making. I see this over and over again. A lot of the things that happen to us as project managers are really learning experiences. It's how you reframe this.
All right. And based on this, I also think that you say that mistakes can make you smarter, right?
Absolutely. You can see mistakes in two ways. One of the ways is shutting down, and I spoke about that earlier. Your brain reacts to this negative feedback as a threat, so you shut down. Another way to respond is it as a wake-up call. Your brain hones in on the negative outcome, and it sees it as an opportunity for problem solving, and you get very creative, and you start to see things and work with problems in a way that's different than what you were doing before. It's a growth opportunity.
All right. Now, in your presentation, you have a list of the project management 10 common mistakes. Now, we're not going to go through all of these. We selected 5 of them. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to read out what the mistake is that we make as project managers, and then you can tell us a little bit more about that particular mistake. And in the end, of course, the presentation is called How to Recover from Mistakes. Then we're going to go into the recovery process. But first, I think it's important that we look at these mistakes and talk a little bit more about them. So mistake number 1 is preparing an ambitious schedule. And I think everyone has done that.
Oh, we've all done that. And it's not just a question of progressive elaboration. We know that as we go through the process of project management, that we are going to discover things that we didn't consider earlier. But what I've seen before over and over again is the ambitious schedule. And the problem with an ambitious schedule is that the client thinks it's realistic and they want to hold us to that. So it's a double-edged sword. Not only are the milestones that have been set, are they going to slip because it's not possible? Because we haven't really, we're looking on the positive side. We're not looking the realistic side. And so
Right.
Yeah.
That's once again the rosy glasses, right, that we have there.
Exactly. We go back to that. Everything's going to work out in the end. Everything's going to come in on time. If it does slip, we all add that 20%. They tell us to put the 20% in.
Exactly. But, there's another danger that we have. Maybe you have prepared a schedule that is not ambitious, but then management comes and cuts it down for you. And instead of standing up and saying, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't work, you accept the ambitious schedule and you make that mistake.
That's true as well.
Yeah.
True as well.
Then another mistake in your list is ignoring problems. What do you mean by that?
We tend to look at things in a way that when we have a problem, when an issue comes up, sometimes we think that it'll go away. If we just ignore it long enough, it'll go away. But what this really is for us, we know that we need to resolve problems early before they become bigger. And we also need to understand that this tendency to ignore problems, it comes from a fear. And it's the fear of being found wanting. It's the fear of making the wrong decision. It's the fear of failure that's driving that. Ignoring the problem is not going to go away. It's probably going to get worse. I mean, it's very rare to see a problem just disappear without being handled and managed properly.
Right. Next is failing to share accountability with functional managers. Now, I find this an interesting one because often, in my project at least, functional managers were only marginally involved in my project. So how do you see this? How do we fail to share our accountability with them?
One of the things that we need to keep in mind is that we should be negotiating for deliverables rather than people. Both the PMs and the functional managers have accountability for the success or failure of that project. Now, there are times when perhaps the structure of the company or the structure of the organization that you're in doesn't support that. You may have to go to executive management and state your case, but it's very important that functional managers feel that they're a part of the project. They share responsibility for the success or failure.
The next mistake is failing to understand what stakeholders and sponsors want to hear. Now, that's an interesting one. Tell me a little more about this.
I see this all the time. The dashboard. When we're looking at our metrics, we need to make sure that we understand that these are the metrics that the stakeholders want to see. we don't understand what they're trying to tell us. We're not processing that information. We need to give them the information that they want in a manner that is consumable for them, be that via report or the all important dashboard. We need to provide that to them, the things that they want to see and hear, so that they can use their own tracking instruments as well.
Right. And the fifth and final mistake that we want to look at here is not fully understanding requirements. I think this is probably the biggest one.
This is huge, Cornelius. It's not sourcing that subject matter expert. The person is there. IIBA has given us guidelines for gathering requirements, for determining what the true requirements are. We have so much information available to us to make these decisions, but we tend to use our own interpretation of what the requirements are. This is something that we need to move away from. We need to use those subject matter experts.
All right. So we've looked at 5 mistakes, and of course, each one of these mistakes will lead to different outcomes. Some will lead outright to project failure. Others will just lead to communication issues and problems with the sharing of the resources and all of that. But in the end, the mistakes have been made. We all make them still. And now we want to move on. We want to recover. We want to learn from them. So how do we learn from our mistakes?
It's a very simple process. You have to, first of all, acknowledge that you made the mistake. Giving excuses is a signal. And what I mean by that is it's a signal to your team that giving excuses is acceptable. And that's not what we want to communicate. Project managers are in a leadership position, so we should behave in a leadership manner. We need to explain what happened, and we need to say why. And there's 3 steps to acknowledging your mistakes. You say simply, here's what happened. You summarize the faulty decision, and then you make that declaration that, I am accountable for this. And then the third thing that you want to do is extract the lesson for the future. You might add, I'm sharing this with you so that we can all learn from my mistake.
Mm. And I think the first 2 steps, they're usually the same, recounting and saying I'm responsible for it. And in the third step that you're mentioning here, is this also an action step saying, this is the problem that we've caused. Now, this is what we have to do to fix it?
Yes, because the idea is you want to correct it as quickly as possible.
You mentioned in your presentation that you have the triple R's. What are those?
The triple R's actually comes from the sports industry. And when I was younger, I liked to race competitively, run competitively. And one of the things that I found to be very helpful is the triple R's. And it's basically release, review, and reset.
Release, review, and reset. Now, how does that connect with those 3 steps of acknowledging my mistakes? Is that similar? Is this the same? Is this just a better way of remembering it?
Now we're moving into the process of recovering from your mistake. You've made your mistake. You've acknowledged the mistake. Now it's time to move on. And what is the process to do that? And that's the triple R's. The first thing that we need to do is we have to move forward. So we have to release. You think of it as climbing a ladder. You have to release your hand to reach up for that next rung. And so you have to release the negative side of that experience. And then you're going to move forward with it.
And how do you personally release after you've noticed, oops, we've made a mistake? What's your release action, so to speak?
Once I realize I've made a mistake, I immediately go into a problem-solving mode. In other words, I acknowledge the mistake. Colin Powell is supposedly the master of this technique. We all move through the process. We all do this. Some people do it a little bit faster than others. For some people, it takes a week. For some people, it takes a minute. And for some people, it takes a second. I made a mistake. Here's the mistake. This is what I do next to move on.
All right. And that was the release phase. Then we move on to the review phase. Is this just a review of what's happened and how could this happen and what did we do wrong? Is that what we mean by review?
Exactly. We're going to review it. And what we're looking for is where did we go wrong? Is this the right game plan? Is this the right approach? We want to review it in the sense that we want to also reframe it as well. We want to make a reassessment and move forward.
And finally, we have reset. What do you mean by reset?
Reset is simply a clue. It's a trigger, and it should be a personal word for you. It's the end of the process. Now it's time. You've made your mistake. You've released that negative emotion. You've reviewed what needs to be done next, and now you need to reset. Now you need to move on. And I'll give you my own personal experience. I was running once. I was in the military, and I took a trail that was off the path. I tripped over a stump that was in the ground. It was a tree stump, and I hurt my leg. Now, I was isolated. It was getting dark. I didn't know my way out of the woods. I had hurt my leg very badly. And I started this very negative self-talk. What am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this? And it was as if a voice said to me, get up. Just get up. Get up and start walking. And as I walked through the path, I could hear traffic on the other side. And I moved towards that area. And that's my trigger word is get up. So we need to have a word that brings us full circle out of that process. We're done now, and we've got to step forward. So we need to find something, a powerful clue word or phrase that you can use, that you can internalize, and you can use that to move you forward.
All right. So we've had 3 steps to acknowledging your mistakes, saying, here's what happened, then summarize the faulty decision and declare I'm accountable for this, and then extract the lesson for the future. Then we had followed up with learning from our mistakes with the triple R's: release, review, and reset. Now, the 3 steps, I can see this is something that you do in public, right? That's the public statement. Here's what happened. I'm accountable for it. The triple R's: release, review, reset. Is this something that you do internally? Is this something that you do as a team? How would you apply this?
This you would do internally.
Okay. And so there's no need really to bring the team into this and have somebody else join you in this whole process then?
No, this is taking place inside of you. Remember what I said, there's 2 ways to handle a mistake. One is to shut down, and the other is to get creative. This release, review, and reset will take you to that creative place.
All right. Now, we're already at the end, however. The mistake has happened and we're recovering from this. Could a mistake be avoided in the first place?
Some mistakes can be avoided. What we do in some systems is we find a way to block that error. In other words, it's just like an electrical plug. It has the 3 prongs, one prong being wider than the other, to keep us from plugging it in incorrectly. So there's some things that you can build into a system, but you can never totally eliminate mistakes.
Right. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. In conclusion here of how to recover from mistakes and keep your project moving, what would be your 2 to 3 tips that you would like to give to our listeners here today that they can apply right now on their project if they run into a problem or if they find a mistake and they want to recover from it?
The first thing to keep in mind is that between a stimulus and a response, there is a gap. There is a space there. It is what defines us as humans. So instead of reacting to a situation, we need to take that space. That's our recovery area. That's our place where we can do the triple R's. We need to go into that area and put us into a more creative frame of mind.
All right. So let me make sure. Were those your 2 to 3 tips so we can close the interview out here?
Yes, and another thing that I'd like to add is just to keep in mind that we all make mistakes. It's a part of life, but what we have to do is develop a mental resilience, or what I like to call a strong mind. And this is only going to come through practice and experience. Like anything else, it's like a muscle that you develop. So by using these techniques, you'll find them difficult at first, but as you continue to use it, you'll get stronger and faster at recovery, and you'll move into that creative space that I spoke of earlier, where you are more effective and more efficient and more productive.
Right, because mistakes will happen. It's just a fact of life as a project manager. And having this process available to you and knowing about it and being able to apply it, that's really where the magic lies, right? That's how you can recover.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, Carla, thank you very much for coming on to the program today and talking to us about the process of how to recover from mistakes. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me on the show.
And that was our discussion with Carla Fair-Wright on how to recover from mistakes. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. And as always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. If you are a project manager who wants to become PMP or PMI ACP certified, then the easiest way to do so is with our sister podcasts, the PM Prepcast or the Agile Prepcast, and study for the exam by watching the in-depth exam prep video training from pmprepcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, yes, please do tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. It's a quote from Mario Andretti that works on Formula One car racing just as well as it works here for us on project management. If everything seems under control, well, you're just not going fast enough. Until next time.